The end loomed near for SNK and Yumekobo, but they still kept on kicking. On January of 2000, the Japan-exclusive sequel to Biomotor Unitron was released. Kikou Seiki Unitron, or Armor Century Unitron, builds upon the original's world and gameplay. Once again, it's your job to customize your own Unitron and face whatever challenges get in your way. If you haven't watched my video on Biomotor Unitron, I recommend doing so before this one. This time around, you can only play as one of two human characters, Chess or Nina, but you can pick from 1 out of 5 different partners. If you're playing as Chess, you get to pick from 5 cute girls. If you're playing as Nina, you get to pick from 5... well, if I was a girl, I'd probably call them cute boys. While the story remains the same regardless of which partner you pick, they all have their own mannerisms and way of speaking, giving you a good reason to replay the game. At the end of Biomotor Unitron, the player character took down the ancient evil that had just awakened. However, this also caused the Unitron crystals to lose their power, rendering the Unitrons unusable. To fix this, the player and his partner begin working on an alternative power source. The sequel starts with an obnoxiously long wall of text. It talks about the kingdom of Raphias, located on the continent of Tridis in the planet Elsia. With the power of the Unitrons, the kingdom ruled over the continent and the people of Tridis enjoyed an age of prosperity. During this time, they created Yggdrasil. This Death Star in the making gathered the power of the spirits and transformed it into energy. But of course, with such a meaningful name, things had to go wrong. For some unknown reason, Yggdrasil exploded, unleashing a catastrophic wave of energy throughout the world. On that moment, a large part of the planet's population was lost, and civilization was more or less thrown into a dark age. This tragedy would be named Ragnarok, because of course it would. Those who survived eventually began to rediscover the culture and technology of times past. Unitrons were a particularly rare commodity, and invaluable for protecting the people from monsters and bandits. As the various countries rebuilt themselves, they formed armies composed of Unitrons. Citizens called them Armor Knights. To the east of Tridis lies the continent of Radina. In it exists a country called Gallia, owner of the continent's most powerful army of Armor Knights. One of the highest achieving knights is Kikou. From his union with his wife, Eileen, 2 children were born. One is the protagonist, Chess or Nina. The other is Regina... Regina? You know what, let's just call him Reggie. The protagonist is an energetic kid who wishes to follow in his father's footsteps and become a Unitron pilot. In contrast, Reggie was a quiet, kind kid who hated conflict and doted on his mother. But peace wouldn't last. When the 2 children turned 6 years old, a new war started. To protect his family and his country, Kikou departed for battle. As the war stretched out for the next 3 years, resources began to drain. Anxiety and lack of food led to civil unrest, and rebellions and betrayals brought out the evil within the hearts of people. When the father had finally returned victorious, he was greeted by sad news. His wife had died protecting the 2 brothers from an angry mob looking for food. Watching his mother die filled Reggie's heart with hatred. Hatred for warmongering people, and hatred for his father who abandoned his family to go fight a war. Even as the days went by, Reggie's feelings never changed. 3 years more had passed since the end of the war. One day, Reggie was visiting a nearby spring where his mother used to bring the 2 brothers. Meanwhile, the protagonist was returning home from an errand when suddenly there was a blinding white flash. As he rushed home, he's told that his house is on fire. Once he reaches it, it's already too late. Moments away from death, his father says that it's only natural that he would atone for his sins. He then gives the protagonist a key and a pendant, the latter of which he should give to Reggie. These were to be his final words. However, Reggie was nowhere to be found. The key that the protagonist receives turns out to be the key to his father's Unitron, and so you now take control of the protagonist in a quest to find Reggie. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of backstory. It even swaps between the happy music and sad music several times. You're then thrown into a battle. Naturally, you're going to lose this sexy robot very soon. It's all busted from your travels, so you stop by a nearby town in search of a Unitron workshop. It's here that you meet Thomas Orbit and his daughter or son. They patch up your Unitron, but most parts were beyond repair, so you now have a steaming pile of scrap. Your starting parts and elemental affinity depend on who you picked as your partner. A few minutes later, you're introduced to one of the changes made from Unitron 1. You're sent to look for a new core to power your robot in a nearby dungeon. After walking around for a bit, you find this thing. Or this thing if you're playing as the female protagonist. We can call it Fluffy. In the first game, your maximum EP was dictated by your equipped core. This time, Fluffy is your core. Just like your Unitron itself, Fluffy has HP, EP, attack, defense and speed stats. By feeding it materials, these stats can change, directly affecting your Unitron's stats. It's also very easy to exploit. The game still throws barrels of cash at you, so you're free to buy a ton of materials and feed them all to Fluffy. The individual stat boosts are small, but after feeding 50 bars of metal to a magical furball, you definitely notice the difference. Following up on the EP growth is the change to EP recovery between battles. That is, it doesn't recover anymore. You need to use items or the charge command during battle. The inventory system has also changed. Previously, you had slots for every single item and could carry up to 9 of each. Now they all share the same limited inventory space of 60 items, none of which stack. These two factors combined theoretically lead to the player having to consider what items to prioritize. In practice, however, status effects are very rare, so those go down the toilet first. There's also a wider variety of special skills to use in battle, which includes healing HP, status effects, and increasing stats. Since most regular enemies aren't particularly dangerous, you can just spend a few turns charging EP and using these skills instead of items. Dungeons received a few changes as well. You can find fountains or stone tablets that either damage the player, recover HP or EP, or permanently raise the Unitron's stats. The dungeons also now have fixed layouts instead of randomized ones. They are also longer, but you can enter them from a few different start points. The 4 basic dungeons also have teleporters scattered through them. Some teleport you to other locations in the same map, others straight up teleport you to one of the other dungeons. Sometimes you can also find this cutie. Talking to her opens her shop, from which you can buy some rare but expensive equipment and items. One of these dungeons is the ruins of Rafias, where the first game took place in. You actually get to explore the remains of the old arena, which I thought was pretty cool. There are more links to the previous game in the post-credits dungeon. It gets a bit weird, and also pretty ridiculous and stupid, but it was nice to see the callbacks to Unitron 1. The crafting has been both expanded and scaled back. On one hand, there are less total parts to acquire. A lot of weapons that were simply stronger versions of another one were removed. On the other hand, you can now craft legs and backpacks too. Parts can also be upgraded up to 10 times. Combinations that don't result in a new part cause the base part to receive a small stat boost. The basic gameplay has otherwise remained more or less the same. You will explore dungeons, fight random enemies or arena matches in turn-based battles, collect money and items, and upgrade your Unitron. The difficulty balance is still far from perfect, but it's definitely not as easy to become the Alpha and the Omega. Elemental affinity plays a much smaller part, however, since many weapons have a neutral affinity and thus are neither weak nor strong against other elements. The game's presentation remains similar but improved. Characters have detailed portraits during dialogue, while battles have the participants sliding around and unleashing RPG Maker effects. I do have to say that some of the sprite work is excellent though. The music, on the other hand, is not particularly good. A few tracks, such as the regular battle theme, are straight up reused from Unitron 1, but most new tracks are decent enough. A shame that the final boss music is, quite literally, a 5-second loop. They might as well have just recycled the previous final boss music. Honestly though, I think that what bothers me the most about this game is how it feels like half the story is missing and what's there feels undercooked. Despite starting with a long intro, the story only gets so dense again at the final boss, at which point it derails completely. I think the best way to describe it is this: the story has a start and an ending, but no middle. Early on in the game, you're tasked with taking down a group of bandits hiding in the forest. After doing so, you're informed that a man referred to as the Black Knight might be the person that you're looking for. You find him in the ruins of Raphias, you get trashed, and now you're already going after him again before he completes his evil plan. Things escalate very quickly. Once you catch up with him, you fight the Churk again. After you win, his personality does a 180 turn because plot, and you're supposed to feel bad about this. Right after that, you get some Greek mythology thrown in for good measure and fight the real final boss, who babbles on about fate or whatever. What the heck? Don't get me wrong, there are good ideas buried inside, but they needed better pacing and more development. Why does the story establish the existence of an entire new continent at the start, but never refers to it ever again? Why is Thomas' orbit or his connection to your partner never brought up again? Why is that Satira girl from the intro only present for 1 minute before getting struck with plot magic? And why do you never even learn her name in game? Why does the end of the main story suddenly build up to the revival of Unitron 1's Ancient Evil before completely dropping it and bringing a completely new plot thread out of nowhere 5 minutes later? I mean, seriously, it even plays the first game's final boss music during a cutscene. Why does the bandit girl get hyped up so much when the rest of her screen time is only in a minor appearance after the credits? And why does she look so much like the princess, who is only introduced after the credits, along with this other girl, even though they don't have any relevance whatsoever? It's like the developers had plans for a much bigger and polished game, but there was no time or budget for it. This is actually a possibility given that SNK wasn't doing very well around 2000. Kikou Seiki Unitron was released in January of 2000, the same month in which SNK was acquired by Aruse, a company focused on pachinko. SNK lacked money for their video game endeavors, however. In June of the same year, SNK closed down their American branch, which is very likely why this game remained a Japan exclusive. In October of 2001, SNK declared bankruptcy, and with that, Yumekobo's fate was sealed. It's a shame because I really enjoyed what is there. Oh well. SNK seems to be trying to get back on its feet, so hey, who knows. Maybe one day we'll have a new Unitron game. Who am I kidding?